Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. At least 2 people are dead after tornadoes and severe weather hit the area.
I mean, for them it's a war. For us it's turned out to be easier than we thought.
Breaking down the war on Iran with the president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. A look at Preservation Chicago's list of the city's most endangered buildings for 2026.
You're never unqualified to be courageous, you know, that there's just something you can do.
And she's 92 and still telling powerful stories. Meet an author preserving the history of the Underground Railroad. First off tonight, neighbors in northern Illinois and Indiana are cleaning up after thunderstorms spawned numerous tornadoes, killing 2 people in Indiana. Survey crews are on the ground to confirm the total number of tornadoes as well as their strength. Kankakee County took the brunt of one supercell thunderstorm, which was tracked for 100 miles, eventually crossing into Indiana. That same storm also brought exceptionally large hail, including a 6-inch hailstone in Kankakee. Another supercell dropped 2 to 4-inch hail on Chicago's western and southern suburbs. Nearly 20 Democratic governors, including Illinois' J.B. Pritzker, are calling on Congress to block President Trump from imposing any new tariffs on imported goods. In a letter to congressional leadership of both parties, the governors say, quote, "At this pivotal moment, action to clarify and limit the scope of presidential tariff authority under existing statutes is needed, including guardrails that allow for congressional review and approval before sweeping emergency tariff structures affecting the economy are set into motion." Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act did not give the president power to impose a broad array of tariffs without congressional approval. Trump responded by invoking another law to impose 10% tariffs on nearly all imported goods. Pritzker and other Democratic leaders have seized on the issue to highlight persistent inflation and growing concerns of affordability of everyday items. CTA leaders are touting a new security plan, but some employees today are pushing back with complaints. At the transit agency's monthly board meeting, officials discussed the new safety effort demanded by the Federal Transit Administration over claims of security lapses. The plan includes a 75% increase in police hours, including through a new partnership with the Cook County Sheriff's Office. Other measures include bus ride-alongs, new barriers at stations, and social service outreach efforts. CTA officials say employees have been included in developing safety measures, but a group of bus operators and mechanics demonstrating outside the meeting today argue their concerns haven't been adequately addressed. We've got much more of this story on our website. Up next, one-on-one with a global affairs specialist about the fallout from the war on Iran.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
In its 12th day, the war in Iran has left 7 U.S. service members killed and about 140 injured. It's reportedly resulted in more than 1,300 casualties in Iran, including 175 people in a strike on a school, the majority of whom were children, as well as hundreds in Lebanon and at least 12 killed in Israel. Several polls show a majority of Americans disapprove of the controversial war. President Trump said Monday that the war will resemble a, quote, short-term excursion though Iran's blockade of the flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz may extend the timeline. Meanwhile, an Iranian official said, quote, Iran will determine when the war ends. To help us analyze the situation, we are joined by Leslie Venjamori, president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Among many other positions, she served as director of the U.S. and the Americas program at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, known as Chatham House in London. Thank you for joining us, Leslie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So in February, on the eve of these strikes, you wrote an analysis of President Trump's strategy for the war in Iran, and you called the tactics, quote, coercive diplomacy, which you describe as being conventional but difficult to execute. Define that strategy and how it's playing out for us, please.
A coercive diplomacy, when you use the threat to use military force, either in a limited way or in a more fulsome way, in order to to, in a sense, require the target of your coercion, Iran in this case, to deliver on a clearly set of articulated goals and objectives. And so, what it looked like was that President Trump had deployed a very large armada to the region during ongoing talks in Geneva, and that he was, in a sense, very clearly threatening to use some sort of military force were Iran not to kind of step up and deliver on the articulated goals of the talks. I mean, this is a very hard thing to do in a perfect environment. It's especially hard to do when you have a president that sort of specializes in disruption, uncertainty, unpredictability. Coercion, requires you to clearly articulate what it is that you expect to see, to credibly commit to a certain form of punishment if you don't see that. And we certainly saw the punishment, but what we're learning is that, Iran was participating in the talks, that they were producing documents about what they would deliver, and that the U.S. and Israel clearly just decided that the time was now to strike.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been advocating for intervention in Iran for decades. Israel has launched a bombing campaign against Hezbollah in Lebanon, opening another front in this war, moving several miles into a neighboring country. What are Israel's goals for the region?
I mean, Israel clearly has a legitimate security concern. Iran does not recognize the right of Israel to exist. Prior to the last year or so, Iran had a lot more power across the region. It was using proxies to execute all sorts of campaigns that were not in Israel's interests, that were a threat to its security. So, given the positioning of Israel, given that threat, Israel has clearly wanted to get rid of the risk that Iran might have a nuclear weapon at some point, take out its ballistic missiles, but also reduce its ability to provoke and commit terror across the region. The question then is, were they also adamant or desiring regime change? I think the answer is clearly yes to that question.
How much of the U.S.'s diplomatic interests have been tied up in and dictated by those of Israel?
The United States for a long time has wanted to see zero capacity on the part of Iran to produce a nuclear weapon. The question of whether it was willing to expand those goals, clearly the United States has not liked the ballistic missiles program. It hasn't liked the regional activity, but the question of regime change is a whole another step. And there is a sense that the United States and Israel were sort of pulling together on this, that Israel's clear interest and commitment and conviction have shaped President Trump's decisions in the region. But there's a real ambiguity here. How closely are the United States and Israel aligned right now? Are they pulling apart? Many people think they're pulling apart on their goals. And this matters right now, because if the United States were to decide, game over, we're done, we're sort of withdrawing, it's not at all clear that Israel will follow suit. It has its own ambitions right now and a tremendous amount of strength.
I think a lot of folks are wondering, how long is this conflict likely to go? The president's administration has not given a very clear picture on that, only to say, it'll be over soon. Based on similar interventions that we know about in the region, how long could this go on?
This could go on for a very long time. I mean, I think that the problem is that you go in with one objective, your objectives change, the situation on the ground changes, the war has widened. It has escalated. Iran's retaliation has been very significant, attacking American interests across the Gulf, attacking the Qataris, the Saudis, their interests across the Gulf. And so you see the potential for the U.S. getting pulled further and further in. And it's not clear. I think the concern that so many of us have, certainly I have, is that the U.S. government and its component parts hadn't really been working together, communicating to the president the risks of escalation, the unintended consequences that were likely to flow from the initial strikes, and having a set of objectives for how to manage those, how to limit them, and at what point the U.S. would retreat. So it's entirely possible that President Trump sort of calls it a day, says enough is enough. It's not at all clear that Israel would follow suit. It's not at all clear that Iran would follow suit. I think that the U.S. doesn't control this war right now. It's a dominant player, but it is one of several in the region. It's not clear what the Gulf states will do. They're sort of being asked provocatively and under coercion to join in. So this could end quickly, or it could go on for a long time. But even if it ends, the problem is now fundamentally different than what the U.S. faced before the strikes, and it is going to be very significant, very dangerous, very risky. And we've heard, just remember, today, the idea that Iran wants to retaliate with drone strikes on the west coast of the United States of America. I mean, this is just quite shocking.
Briefly, before we let you go, there is an ongoing investigation of the U.S. Tomahawk missile that struck near a primary school in Iran, and as we mentioned, killing 175 people, 110 of them killed. Could this be a violation of international law?
You know, on the technical, very important legal question, a lot of it will have to do with intention. But in the broader question, I mean, a couple of things. One is we tend to focus on how wars are fought when it comes to the legal question. There is a question of whether the entire operation is legal. It is an illegal war. There wasn't an imminent threat to the United States. There was a decision to use force while negotiations were ongoing. You then get to the question of the devastating, tragic loss of lives, the killing of a lot of young girls in a school. The scary part is, you know, whether it's determined after this investigation is concluded to have been illegal or illegal. It's so far been determined to be the responsibility of the United States. President Trump needs to acknowledge this, needs to take responsibility, needs to apologize to the Iranians, to the people.
Certainly.
Apart from the grave humanitarian crisis, there's also a larger question, which is that we lose the hearts and minds of people around the world when we don't take responsibility.
Yeah, it's a very tragic situation. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. My thanks to Leslie Benjamin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, efforts to preserve some of Chicago's architectural gems. Pope Leo XIV's childhood church, the Chicago Stock Exchange trading room at the Art Institute, the bridges and tender houses along the Chicago River. These are some of the sites on Preservation Chicago's 2026 list of the city's most endangered buildings. Since 2003, the organization has released an annual list highlighting historic sites at risk of deterioration or demolition in hopes of building public support to save them. Joining us to discuss this year's list is Ward Miller, Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. Welcome back, Ward. So you all...
Thank you so much for hosting us.
You release the most endangered list every year. What is the goal of putting these buildings in the spotlight, and how do you decide which buildings to spotlight?
Well, that's exactly the goal, to spotlight these buildings and to encourage their preservation. And bringing this list public really does make the general public aware of these buildings that are facing an uncertain future and oftentimes cornerstones of our community. So it's really important that we do this, and it's a long effort, and we usually get about 70 candidates, and we boil that down to seven Chicago, 7 candidates.
What are the biggest threats to historic buildings in Chicago today? Neglect, redevelopment pressure, or just deterioration? What else?
A combination of all the above, really. We have some bad actors out there, but we also have a lot of buildings that are just falling into disrepair that people are not aware of. And our goal here is not only to make the public aware of it, but to encourage that we find good stewards for troubled buildings.
So let's get into the list. One of the featured sites is the Chicago Stock Exchange trading room, which is inside the Chicago Art Institute. Give us a history of that room and why you all believe it's endangered.
Sure. So this room was originally part of an Adler and Sullivan building on LaSalle Street, 30 North LaSalle, so LaSalle in Washington. And during its demolition, it was saved by a group of preservationists led by John Vinci and Richard Nickel, who lost his life in the building. And it was relocated to the Art Institute in 1972 and opened to the public in 1977. It was a 5-year effort to build this new wing to the Art Institute by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. Walter Netsch was involved in that, and now the Stock Exchange trading room, almost 50 years later, is facing a potential demolition threat by a new addition to the Art Institute. And we think that the Art Institute should be, instead of demolishing rooms or these rooms facing an uncertain future, to build in the railroad trench like we did at Millennium Park across the street, and actually add to the Art Institute rather than demolish a significant room and space. Also, McKinlock Court, that beautiful garden that we all love sitting in and dining in and listen to jazz concerts in long ago, is also in the crosshairs of an uncertain future.
Another building on the list is the St. Mary of the Assumption Church and School on Chicago's far south side. Of course, the church took on a new significance after Robert Francis Prevost, who attended the church as a kid, became the Pope, Pope Leo XIV. Give us that story and the condition that the church is in now.
Right. So, as you mentioned, this is Pope Leo's childhood church and school. His family was involved there, and really a significant site in the in the Chicago neighborhood of Riverdale, which is different than the suburb of Riverdale, which is located just across the street, one direction, Dalton in the other. So this is at a far south corner of the city, in a neighborhood that you may not even traverse to or visit, because it is in a corner of the far south side of the city. So this church was closed. It was a St. Mary of the Assumption Roman Catholic Church. It was closed in 2011. It's gone to a couple of people. The most recent gentleman, Joe Hall, has been committed to restoring the building and use it as a workforce development site, as well as a community building. And we just noticed that the buildings, there are 5 total with additions, are in, unfortunately, not so great shape, and really facing an uphill battle to restore them. So we think this could be an amazing site, a transformational site for the Riverdale community of Chicago, which has seen so much disinvestment over the last 50 years. And this would be potentially a site of great pilgrimage, maybe an oratory. There's all sorts of ideas that might be able to happen here if we have the right kind of funding and if we bring attention to this church and school complex.
Another one on the list, and anybody who goes downtown, we traverse the bridges and pass by the tender houses, and probably don't think about this, but Chicagoans, walk or drive past them all the time. Some were built as early as the 19th century. Tell us about the bridges and, of course, the tender houses as well, and what the challenges they're facing now are.
Sure. These are iconic to Chicago. We have the largest amount of bascule bridges anywhere in the world. And those bridges, when they open, are almost like welcoming arms to our city. And what we're finding is the tender houses and the bridges are really in not so great shape. And some of them are being demolished, like the tender house at Chicago Avenue, which was one of the earliest, along with Portland Avenue, which is being restored as we speak. And of course, the Michigan Avenue Bridge is landmark, but they're all showing signs of wear and tear and distress. A lot of the stonework needs to be tuck pointed. We're seeing a lot of checking or missing components to the stonework, which is really unfortunate, and really needing a scraping and painting. But that's just the surface. So we're really concerned about these bridges, and we want to see a CDOT, that's the Chicago Department of Transportation, and the Illinois Department of Transportation work together with the city, preserve these buildings, restore them, and these great structures, and also give a Chicago landmark designation to many of them on the main channel of the Chicago River and the north and south branches.
So before we let you go, the Chicago Loop Synagogue is another historic site on the list. With fewer people commuting, downtown and attending morning service post-pandemic. Tell us about this location and what you all see forward for the building.
It's in the heart of the Loop. It's at 16 South Clark, so Clark and Madison, basically. It's almost a complement, if you will, to St. Peter's Church, St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church. It was going up at the same time, sort of both ends of the good book, so to speak. But you know, St. Peter's was built in about the same time, and then Loop Synagogue came just a little bit later, 1957, by Lovell Schlossman and Hackle, and a great building
yeah,
with a
and we know
beautiful
it's
window.
yes, it's got that beautiful stained glass window that you can see in the photos. Also on the list, several union halls as well as the Yukon building. Folks can go to our website to learn about more of those. But we're going to have to let Ward Miller of Preservation Chicago go. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for hosting us.
Up next, a local author helping keep history alive. Stay with us. A 92-year-old author proves it's never too late to keep telling powerful stories. A voice many people may not know, but one that has worked tirelessly to preserve the history of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. She's written several books with a passion to educate others and encourage readers of all ages to keep learning. Joanna Hernandez introduces us.
Harriet had been born in Dorchester County on Maryland's eastern shore.
Glennette Tilley Turner has admired Harriet Tubman for as long as she could remember.
Well, there's so many things about her. She really couldn't read, she couldn't write, and yet she knew how to navigate by the stars.
We're sitting in the home she's lived in since 1968, a house she and her late husband bought in Wheaton as fair housing laws were reshaping DuPage County.
There had been a community here, that one portion they call the Hill, and the other they call the Bottom because it's down near the train tracks. And that had been the area that had been so limited to African Americans. There wasn't even mail delivery when the streets weren't paved.
Now at 92 years old, Tilley Turner has a lifetime of accomplishments behind her. But her journey to this moment began years ago, writing alongside her father, who inspired her to stay curious.
He loved to tell family stories and stories of African American history, particularly about inventors. And he would end every story the same way. He'd say, "Now, when you grow up, you should write this down."
She did. She went on to teach second grade. And along the way, her curiosity grew more for Harriet Tubman. One day, a neighbor mentioned the Underground Railroad operated in Wheaton.
I taught, and so I had the summer free, and I thought, well, I'll go to the DuPage County Historical Museum and prove to myself there was no truth to this. And instead, I found just enough, like a one-line reference here or a footnote there, that convinced me there was some truth to it.
Her research led her to write 2 books about the Underground Railroad in DuPage County and the many railroad sites freedom seekers traveled through in Illinois.
It was really very significant, and Illinois was quite pivotal, not only in the Underground Railroad itself, but Illinois senators, were involved.
Her decades of work have earned widespread recognition for a lifetime spent preserving these stories.
Illinois State Historical Society awarded me with a Lifetime Achievement Award, and DePaul University honored me with an honorary doctorate, so I really felt like a big girl, Harriet had already risked her own life to get north. She was prepared to risk it again.
Her latest work is her 13th book, a children's book, The Gift of Freedom, How Harriet Tubman Rescued Her Brothers.
I taught in my first life, and I think participatory things are best. Actually, the Underground Railroad lends itself to every aspect of the school curriculum, math, science, art, everything.
Are you proud of yourself?
I am. I just, feel like if I contributed anything to not only the quality of my own life, but the quality of other people's lives, it's just twice as nice.
Growing up during the civil rights era, she says her parents encouraged education and the importance of understanding the role Black leaders played in shaping history.
It's never too late, or you're never unqualified to be courageous. You know, that there's just something you can do, and you just keep trying to do problem solving.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Harriet Tubman Day was just yesterday. Her age has not stopped her. Tilley Turner has even started a business giving bus tours of the Underground Railroad in DuPage County. We're back to wrap things up right after this.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Black Voices.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is a multilingual law firm, providing translators for a variety of languages.